Part of this exercise on this lesson is a little bit of history, a little bit of lesson and example in biblical interpretation, and a little bit of fun along the way. So I hope that you enjoy this. And the question is, was Jesus short? Does the Bible have anything to say about this? Does archaeology have anything to say about this? Jesus is often depicted in ways that are just completely historically inaccurate. Blonde hair, Scandinavian, blue-eyed Jesus walking around with this flowing blue and white robe, thoroughly not Jewish. Jesus was Jewish, and he was here to fulfill the law, and he was completely obedient to the law. If Jesus is completely obedient to the law, then you have to take into account Jesus' physical appearance and dress, because he would be dressing as a faithful Jew, which means that Jesus would probably have phylacteries, maybe bound at times to his hand, his forehead. Jesus would have tassels on his robe, which we hear in the woman who has the issue of blood. When Jesus goes to heal the girl who dies, he raises her from the dead along the way. This woman who's been bleeding for 12 years, it says, touches the hem of his garment. That's the tassels on Jesus' robe. It just says Leviticus tells them to put tassels on the robe. Jesus followed the rules. He followed the law. He did not sin, was obedient. Jesus probably had long curls. It says, do not trim the sides of your beard coming down. So Jesus, all of a sudden, we close our eyes and conceptualize him as a first century human being, a first century man walking around first century Palestine. That's the first exercise that we have to do. In archaeology, we know that the average height of males in the first century was about 5'5". And the way that they get that number is from a pretty decent sample size. There were these bone boxes that were there in Jesus' day, called ossuaries. When my grad school friends and I would be on lunch break in graduate school in seminary, we would sometimes go to Buffalo Wild Wings, and they would serve us these wings, and we'd play the trivia game, and they would give us a little cardboard box, and we would put our bones in the box and had this stupid lame joke. We would call those boxes our ossuaries. It's like our little bone box, just bad humor. They had these bone boxes, and they were basically a little bit longer than the length of your femur. That's the longest bone in a decomposed body, is the femur. And from those bones, which were only done that way, that burial practice was only done around the first century. It was not done long before that or long after that. It was the perfect window for us to get some insight into the world of Jesus and into the world of the lives of the people around him. They have calculated that males in the first century were probably about 5'5". And, Isaiah 53 tells us that there was nothing extra special about Jesus. It was not like King Saul, who was head and shoulders above the rest, it seems to me. I'm stating a verse, I'm giving interpretation, could be wrong. But there wasn't anything outstanding about Jesus' looks that made him stand out in and of itself, just the way that he looked. It seems to me as if Jesus was not especially tall for that reason. In the Gospel of Luke, chapter 19, there's this story about Zacchaeus. And Zacchaeus is wanting to see Jesus as Jesus is walking through his town. And here's what it says in Luke 19:1. Jesus entered Jericho and was passing through. And there was a man called Zacchaeus. He was a chief tax collector, and he was rich. Zacchaeus was trying to see who Jesus was, and he was unable due to the crowd because he was short in stature. So he ran on ahead and climbed a sycamore tree in order to see him, because he was about to pass through that way. Sometimes we read the Bible and there are just things we've just passed over a million times and just never really considered. And I at least want you to consider this. I want you to think about this and read it for yourself and see what you think. Read the verse thinking about Jesus as being tall and Zacchaeus being short. It's probably how you've always read the verse. Let's read it again. Zacchaeus was trying to see who Jesus was, and he was unable due to the crowd because he was short in stature. Okay? Now, let's hear that exact same passage with Jesus being the short one. Jesus entered Jericho, was passing through, and there was a man called by the name of Zacchaeus. He was the chief tax collector, and he was rich. Zacchaeus was trying to see who Jesus was, and he was unable to due to the crowd, because he was short in stature. And so he ran on ahead and climbed a sycamore tree in order to see him, because he was about to pass that way. So who's the he? Now, if it's Zacchaeus who's short in stature, he's having a hard time seeing over the people in front of him to see Jesus. If Jesus is short in stature, then Zacchaeus can't see short Jesus in the middle of a crowd, so he climbs the tree to see down to be able to see Jesus. Now let's talk about language here for just a moment. The word for stature being short or tall is the word helakia. And that word is used here in Luke chapter 19, verse 3. It's used in several other places, and sometimes we find it helpful to go and look at the other instances of a word just to see how it's used, especially in the same book. That word is used 8 times in the New Testament. Here's your verses. Matthew 6:27, can any one of you, by worrying, add a single hour to your elekia? To your stature? To your height? No, to your age, to the length of your life, to your maturity. Like, how long are you going to live? You can't live any longer by worrying. The next is Luke 2:52. It says, and Jesus kept increasing in wisdom and in stature and in favor with God and man. Again, there's that word, it's elekia. And does it mean height, like he grew in his height, or does it mean he grew in his age? It really could mean either one. So it's natural as you grow in age when you're a child that you're also going to grow in height. Could mean either one, fairly inconclusive, but it doesn't even mean that Jesus grew to be a tall person. It just means he continued to either grow physically or just that he was aging. The next is Luke 12:25, which is the exact same as Matthew 6:27. Then we have Luke 19:3, which is the Zacchaeus passage, John 9:21 and 23, which is about the man that Jesus healed, who's now running around, and people are saying that, who is this guy and what happened? And he says, well, he is of age, he is of maturity enough to speak for himself. That's John 9:21 and 23. And we have two more. We have Ephesians 4:13, which says, until we all attain unity of faith and of the knowledge of the Son of God, to be a mature man or mature person, to the measure of the stature which belongs to the fullness of Christ. And Hebrews 11:11, by faith even Sarah herself received the ability to conceive even beyond the proper time of life, the proper age that she was. She was beyond that age. It's not about how tall she was, it's about how old she was. So Matthew 6:27, how old? Luke 2:52 we're going to talk about. We have John 19:21 and 23, both about age. We have Ephesians 4:13, which is about stature, but it's about stature in a metaphorical sense, like the stature of Jesus, not about how you must all attain and to be how tall Jesus was. That doesn't make any sense. Hebrews 11:11, Sarah, it's about her age. Age. The only one really about stature, about height stature, is Luke 19:3. Here's what I think. After looking at this verse, after studying over it, looking at the Greek, looking at some commentaries, and just kind of seeing where people are at, I really think here's the deal. Jesus was a normal-looking person. Jesus was a normal-heighted person. Isaiah 53 tells us that, basically. I believe, that's my opinion. You're welcome to differ. I really believe it's Zacchaeus who's short, not Jesus. Just looking at that passage, looking at the Greek, looking at how people have teased that apart, it really seems clear that the short person there is Zacchaeus. But I also think that Jesus was, by our standards today, a short person. So from a biblical perspective, average height person. From a modern day perspective, Jesus was probably a short man, 5'5", because that is just how tall people were at that time. And Jesus seemingly was a fairly average guy. So when Jesus comes back and he comes in on the clouds, don't be afraid or offended or bothered by a 5'5" Jesus. And that's refreshing to me because I'm 5'6". I'm below average in North America, but I'm also possibly taller than Jesus. Although he is the rider on the white horse whose robe is dipped in blood, and he's this amazingly powerful being that I guess his height really doesn't matter, but if he is taller than that in eternity, I'm not going to express any concern over that, over my poor interpretation of Luke chapter 19 and the Zacchaeus story. It shows us a bit about how to use history, archaeology, anthropology, hermeneutics of scripture, how we read the Bible and how we interpret, and how we take different passages in Greek and put them together into a meaningful picture to be able to work through some of that together. That's a very important thing for us to be able to do. You may have noticed that I'm in a little bit of a different location. I'm actually in Franklin, Tennessee. I'm here for some training, and it's been some phenomenal training over the last 3 days, finishing up tomorrow, talking about church planting, simple church planting, and multiplication of small house churches. And so it's just been phenomenal. Please pray that God would start these kind of movements in our country. I believe it's going to happen. I believe it's here. And we really desperately want to be right in the middle of that and be a part of that. And we want to see God move. We're praying for the movement of God. I hope you are too. So that's why my background's a little bit different. That's why my camera is a little bit different. It's not my normal camera. It's not my normal setup. So just, I hope that makes sense. But God is doing some powerful things. Can't wait to share stories eventually about where all this goes.